All right, welcome back. It's Wednesday evening and I've had a nice day at work. Just to be pretty open, I had a pretty terrible day on Tuesday. Oh, was it Monday? One of the earlier days this week, I had a terrible day. Today I had a good day. So just putting that out there because I think it's important to be open about not necessarily mental health, but actually, no, I guess that is mental health. So yeah, that's me opening up about my mental health, and that's as far as I'm going to go into it for today. But yeah, I think it should be more common for men to talk about when they've had a good day or a bad day. Not that women can't, but women typically are a lot better at that. But yeah, um, I think a lot of the time when people go into mental health, it's always like under the premise of like, oh, this is me talking about my battle with depression or anxiety or something pretty serious or severe. Thankfully, I've got none of that at the moment. I'm doing pretty well. Like I said, today was a nice day, but I'm not going to come on here and pretend every day is sunshine and rainbows because it's definitely not. That said, I wanted to make a video today because I didn't want to get out the rhythm of making videos. I think it's been a week since my last upload, and I wanted to tell a story today, or tell a few stories actually. I've got a pretty good theme for today that I think some people may like. It will probably be apparent by the title of the video, and if it's not for you, then fair play. I don't know why you're here. But so I got a Pokemon delivery today, which I was pretty excited about getting home from work to opening that stuff, and I've dealt with it all now, put it all away, sorted it all out. That was all fun and games. That's what we do it for. But it actually inspired me to tell some stories from my childhood that have kind of contributed a lot to sort of not who I am. Oh, I guess it is who I am. Like my interests today as a 27-year-old, in that it kind of led me down the route of gaming, and gaming has been like the backbone of not just for me, but for a lot of like my friends and my circles that I, interact with and stuff like that. It's been the backbone of a lot of people's lives. And so let me start from the start. So picture this, I am in Florida on my family holiday in 2004, but it was like we left on Christmas Day in 2004. So we were there for 2 weeks and we stayed into 2005. My birthday's at the start of the year, so I was actually in Florida for my birthday. Now picture this, might be difficult considering how aged I look nowadays, but how old was I then? 6-year-old me in 2005, waking up on my birthday in a hotel in Florida. This is like one of my core memories, by the way. I'm going into a core memory in today's video, which is pretty cool. I mean, it's cool to immortalize stuff on the internet like this, but I don't predict I'm going to forget this one, but it's out there anyway. So yeah, so I was waking up in Florida in 2005, right at the start. I was probably pretty jet lagged. It was like only a week into the holiday, I think, at this point. And it was my birthday, and I get woken up by the brightest lights. You know, in the morning when somebody turns the light on and it's like blindingly bright, even though it's actually quite a dim like hotel room light. It was a nice hotel. I think it was called, it was a Sheraton Resort in Florida. So it was a nice hotel. And so to preface this, like back then, I'm not gonna get my tiny violin out. I wasn't poor growing up, but my family didn't have big money. In the Florida was a big holiday for us, right? I don't think I'd ever been to the US before. Obviously, I was only 6 years old, so it's very, very normal to have never been to the US before the age of 6. However, I was lucky enough to go to Florida, and I think at the time, now bear in mind I was a kid, I think at the time the dollar was pretty weak against the pound, right? So everything in the US that you could buy to a British person at that time was cheap. So anyway, I woke up that morning to my parents, and my brother was there too, and I got a couple of birthday presents. It was my birthday, that wasn't the weirdest thing. And they were like quite small boxes, right? Now, back then, I don't remember asking for stuff at that age for my birthday. Like, you had the Argos catalogue, and if you weren't looking in the Argos catalogue, for those of you that know what that is, it was this like big fat book, for those of you that don't know. It was this big fat book, and half of it was like, you can buy anything from there nowadays, right? But half of it, the back half, the back third, was toys and games, right? So as a kid, that was like heaven. And loads of kids, especially in the UK, it's a very staple of a British thing for like 2000s kids to have gone through the Argos catalogue with like a biro and circled stuff, right? That was the only way I could ever remember asking for stuff for like Christmas presents on my birthday. So anyway, I opened this box, and little did I know what was in that box was about to change my life. It was about to rock my world, right? It was, I think I actually opened the one that I was supposed to open afterwards first. So opened it up, and it was Pokemon Leaf Green on the Game Boy Advance. Now, I was actually at a retro gaming market with my friend the other day, and I was saying how iconic that little grey strip on the side is with the Game Boy Advance writing on it, right? Opened that up, and I was intrigued because I didn't like I said, I hadn't asked for anything at that age. I don't think I was like asking for stuff for my birthday. I kind of had like the odd idea here and there. You sort of just waffle when you're a kid, don't you? You just sort of say stuff without actually realizing it has any weight. But so I probably asked for like a football or something. But I got this Game Boy Advance game, and then the following present obviously was the Game Boy Advance SP. I didn't have any games consoles at that age. That was my first flavour, my first taste of what gaming was like. Now, for the keen eyes amongst you in these videos, I've got the background footage today is obviously some sort of game. I'll go into that game another time. That's another story for another day. So hit subscribe if you're here for story times. But yeah, so I opened up Pokemon Leaf Green, and I think I also got the Incredibles game. You know, the Pixar film, The Incredibles. I got the game for that as well on the same day. So I got two games. I figured out it must have been some sort of bundle that you could buy the Game Boy and the two games come with it. They still do that for like consoles nowadays, right? You can buy a PlayStation 5 and FIFA or whatever. So yeah, that was my first taste into Pokemon, right? Now, back then smartphones weren't a thing, so like a games console in your pocket was like a pretty big deal for a kid, right? Especially for a kid. Like imaginations as a kid run wild anyway. But having a game like Pokemon looked at the time like the best graphics in the world. I was like, holy shit, this is sick. And I played the hell out of that game. I wish, like modern games nowadays, you have like a counter to tell you how many hours you've played and stuff. If I could have seen the hours that went into that game, although maybe they wouldn't have been that high, because nowadays I feel like it's normal to do like a 6 hour stint in the evening gaming on like any given day. But back then my parents were quite strict. They were probably like, after 2 hours, they were probably like, this boy's eyes are going to be square, his brain's going to get fried. They might have been right. I don't have the square eyes though, when I'm not wearing my glasses, of course. But yeah, they probably actually pulled me off that thing after like 2 hours here and there. I've never actually considered that till now. They weren't the worst parents. It was probably quite a good idea to keep me off of gaming consoles back then. But anyway, it felt like thousands and thousands of hours. It felt like my whole childhood, right? And fast forward a few weeks, right? The holiday's over. I'm back to school. I'm still addicted to my Game Boy. That was like my life. I've still got it in this house today. This is a different house to the one I was living in at that time when I got the Game Boy. But I've still got my Game Boy somewhere today. I maybe should have brought it out for this video as a prop. Maybe I didn't really think that through well enough. But alas, I did not think I'd be here saying alas in a video. Anyway, I'm back at school now. I've returned home. I'm telling all my friends, yo, you gotta get on this, man. These Game Boys are serious business. And at the time, I think it was when you're 6, you're in like a couple years into primary school, right? So a couple years after that, what swept through primary school was for those people that didn't have Game Boys and stuff, or even those that did, were trading cards. Now, I've actually already made a video where I've touched on trading cards on this channel, and they were like the thing that swept through the playground, just rocked everyone's world at school. At that age, you're not really interested in what you're learning in the lessons. You sit there and you're doing the lessons, but you're not really that interested. You know, you're not thinking about your career or anything or the future. You're thinking about who has got the shiny cards that I can trade with in the playground at break time. So back then, don't quote me on this because I might get this wrong, but like I think a pack of Match Attacks was 35p. So Match Attacks are like the football trading cards, right? Pretty standard stuff. The English Premier League had their own like trading cards, and they were called Match Attacks. Actually, before that, they were called Shootout cards. I had like one season's worth of those, and then from that point on, it was Match Attacks, Match Attacks, Match Attacks, to the point where they actually got banned in my primary school, which is pretty nuts. Like I can't think what we must have been doing with those, what kind of havoc we were causing as kids in the playground with Match Attacks for them to get banned, but they got banned. But anyway, I think back then they were about 35p per pack of cards. Now, I think I did actually look into them a little while ago. I think there are some Match Attacks still available today, but they've got like a new brand, I think. I think they're called like Adrenaline or something like that. And I think they're considerably more than 35p a pack, right? Anyway, 35p back then was solid. Like, you'd regularly, you'd come in on a Monday and someone's dad at the weekend has bought them 10 packs because they're divorced from their mum and they only see them at the weekend, so the dad's treated them to 10 packs, right? £3.50. The kid feels rich, right? Stacks of cards that big, of like doubles piles, right? So they would come in, people would trade until it got banned. But now, I wasn't rich, my family weren't rich, I didn't grow up in a particularly rich area, I didn't grow up in a particularly poverty-stricken area either, but those people that had money were buying their kids Pokemon cards, right? Now, bear in mind, I know every Pokemon in the first bloody Pokedex, mate. I've caned this game. I've caned Pokemon Leaf Green. I've probably completed the Pokemon League maybe twice. I probably had a couple save files wiped by my younger brother who like would occasionally borrow my Game Boy to play it and just overwrite the save file because he was a dick. But he was probably about, I mean, he's 3 years younger than me, so he would have been very small at that point. So maybe not, let me not be too harsh on him. But I'm a Pokemon sweat. I'm a Pokemon fanboy at this point, right? And Pokemon cards are a thing, right? The Pokemon version of the Match Attacks, the shootout cards. Why was I not all over these, right? Let me tell you why I wasn't all over these. These little things were £1.35 or like £1.50, maybe even £2.50. This is where my knowledge is like shoddy here because I can't actually remember. Because I never had any. That's the point of this story, right? I never had any Pokemon cards when I was a kid, which is sad. Like, really, you should be getting your small violins out for this one, guys. Like, this is tragic stuff I'm dropping today. This is trauma dumping. But Pokemon cards were so expensive, so I never had any of them, right? However, there was one time, I remember this very vividly, right? This is the story that I was inspired to tell when my Pokemon cards turned up today, right? There was a point where I went to the dentist one day when I was a kid and I hated the dentist, right? Now, I didn't have great teeth as a kid. Still don't have great teeth. But I hated the dentist. It was pretty normal to hate the dentist as a kid and as an adult. I know a lot of adults that are too scared to go to the dentist. I'm not one of them. But anyway, I was at the dentist as a kid and I had a filling, right? Pretty standard stuff. I've always had a big sweet tooth. Those of you that know me know I have like a massive chocolate addiction. But anyway, I was having a filling, right? And that's pretty scary. That's a pretty rough day on probably like a Wednesday or a Thursday. That's a pretty rough day for like a 7, 8-year-old. Now, I don't know what year it was. I could definitely backtrack it and find out by like doing the research based on what I got because I remember it so vividly, but I don't remember the date. I had my filling and my mum didn't, not that she left me there, I was going to say she came to pick me up, but she was just in the waiting room the whole time, right? Probably while I was screaming or crying or whatever. And I'd done the filling, the tears have dried up, feeling a bit crusty on the face. You know that feeling when you've cried a bit too much as a kid. This is real vulnerability, by the way, getting on the internet talking about when I've cried. And my mum, out of nowhere, out of thin air, from behind her back, pulls me out I haven't got any to hand, pulls me out 2 packs of Pokemon cards. Now, obviously, I'm no longer thinking about the pain in my tooth. I'm no longer thinking about what this dentist has just done to the inside of my mouth. I'm no longer thinking about how my lips probably bleeding. I've bit it so hard I can barely talk. I've just been given 2 packs of Pokemon cards, right? Obviously, I was the most grateful I've probably ever been in my life as an adult as well to my mum. I was like, how have you afforded this? Like, have you been working overtime to get me a couple packs of Pokemon cards? Now, back in the day, like £3, £4, £5 probably wasn't that much to my parents. However, if they knew I was going to make a habit out of this, it was not a sustainable habit, right? It was much easier for them to get me Match Attacks and keep me hooked on those bad boys, keep me hooked up to that drug, than be plying me with Pokemon cards every weekend as like a treat. But anyway, I opened these 2 packs of Pokemon cards and I probably got what would be considered today as nothing. I probably got bulk, right? For those in the Pokemon community, I probably got bulk in these 2 packs. However, back then it felt like the holy grail. I probably got a shiny of some sort. Now, obviously, there's shiny cards that are worth nothing and there's also shiny cards that are worth thousands, right? And I found out the other day, I did my research, it was the Pokemon EX Deoxys set. And in my research, I discovered that there's a card in that set that today, in today's market, is worth £20,000. I think in a PSA 10, or maybe even raw. It's a couple of £1,000 raw. Let me put it that way. I could have, I probably unknowingly, as a kid, was this close. As in, if my mum had picked up a different pack from the shopkeeper, I was this close to getting my hands on a £20,000 investment when I was about 8 years old. Mental, right? Obviously back then I didn't know the connotations of and like no one was drawing up charts for Pokemon cards. No one was predicting prices for Pokemon cards back then. It was just like fun. People used to discard them in the street. If they didn't get the cards they wanted, or they just didn't like the Pokemon they got because they were kids, they'd literally put them in the bin. And understandably, parents were like, this is worth nothing, it's cards. Alright, so my mum this day was the hero. But that's not where the story ends, right? Let me tell you about how my mum became a villain. Sorry, mum, if you're watching this. So back then I was probably in year 4 or year 5 at school. And shortly after that, we moved house. I think in year 4, I moved house, right? We actually moved so that my parents wanted me to go to like a better secondary school than the ones that I lived near. So we moved not too far away, like a 10-minute drive away. Probably less than that, like a 5-minute drive away. And we moved to a different area. Now, you might know what's coming. There's a million Pokemon fans with this story. In the process of moving, stuff gets packed up into boxes, obviously. Now, it's a very stressful time. It's a very traumatic time for some people. I was sad enough that I was leaving some of my friends and moving house. And, you know, to help with the stress, to help with the trauma, what people tend to do is before they move, before they pack up all their stuff, taking up hours and hours of their day into boxes, they decide that there's some stuff that they need to get rid of, right? And I'm not going to lie to you, I'm not going to drag the story out anymore. My Pokemon cards got muddied. They got put in a box that did not make it to the next house, right? That means they got put in the bin. I don't even think they got given away. I used to give away a lot of toys when me and my brother grew up and grew out of certain toys. Like my mum would give them to like her friends that had younger kids or whatever. I don't think there's any kids out there with my Pokemon cards. And I'm also, in a way, in a spiteful, nasty way, I'm glad I didn't get the £20,000 Gold Star Rayquaza in that Pokemon pack. But yeah, so maybe that's what like lit something up inside me to collect Pokemon cards today. But yeah, I'm going to do a separate video on my actual collection. I'm going to do like a little collection tour. Maybe I'll do like monthly updates or like bi-monthly updates. Or maybe I won't even put like a strict rule on it. Maybe I'll do it if and when I feel like it, because there's definitely going to be times where I'm not collecting that intensely, and there's definitely going to be times where I'm collecting a few more bits. Like I'm going to a London card show. Going to the London card show in May. So if anybody happens to be watching this video that's going to be at the London card show in May, drop me a comment or drop me a message or drop me a follow on something and let me know you're going to be there. There is actually like a bit of a meetup going on in one of the communities I'm in. So if you fancy it, hit me up. Leave your stories about your Pokemon childhood, your Pokemon past, your Pokemon career, if you want to call it that, in the comments below. And until then, I hope you have a great day. It's actually evening here. The sun's actually been going down as I've been doing this video. So if you've caught me with my eyes fixated on that direction, there's a lovely sunset tonight. It's a lovely day. And yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this little story time. I hope you've enjoyed having a break from your day today. And yeah, I'm going to be back soon. I've got a long list of videos that I want to get out. And this actually wasn't really one of the ones at the top of my list, but I just felt like telling these stories today. And now they're out there eternally. And I'm grateful for that. So thank you if you've made it this far. And I'll catch you on the flip.